Has Jethro Tull been a very lucrative business, though, right from the word go?
No, the first 4 years I don't think we really saw any money other than we were being, sort of handed £30 a week to live on every week. By about 1973, we had royalties coming in. In fact, by 1972, we knew we'd made a lot of money, but because of the system of, royalties don't just sort of get paid you straight away. I mean, it does take a while for it to come through the system, and it was about 1973 that I started having a bank account with money in it, and I realised there was actually quite a lot there. And that's when, if you like, the moral decision has to come about. Either you're going to use that money and put it back into the system in some way, or you're going to stash it. And really, everybody gave me the advice, stash it, get out of Britain, go and live in Switzerland, put it in a Swiss bank, very little in the way of tax, and, save the money while you can, because you might not have any, might have any income at all in 5 years' time.
Did you ever anticipate that Jethro Tull was going to carry on as long as it has now, and still extremely popular? Let's be quite honest, I mean, there's been a completely, a real development in music since Tull first went on the road. In fact, there's a complete development since the late 1970s even.
Well, there have been certainly some changes, but I think they're just, the changes in music, generally speaking, have been back towards showbiz again. I mean, when I started playing music when I was at school, and this is dodging your question, but we'll come back to it in a minute, when I started playing music at the age of 15 or 16, it was in the sort of period immediately after the Cliff Richards and the Marty Wilds and the Billy Furies. Now, all those guys who were the pop stars or rock and roll stars of the day, they were part of a business which was traditional showbiz. The managers and agents, the Larry Parnes and all these people, and the publishers, the Dick Jameses and all these guys, they were archetypal showbiz people. They were the same guys who booked the Morecambe and Wiseys and the Roy Castles or, what have you. They were showbizzers. Big cigars, flashy suits, it was a showbiz environment. Alma Cogan, goodness knows what it was all about. But that's what it was. When we came along, we were part of that thing that was the progressive era of music. Everything began to change at that point because the musicians themselves went into it disobeying all the rules about, the kind of things you wore on stage, the way you behaved on stage. We went on playing music we wanted to play, not the things that were being dictated to us by a record company or a publisher or a producer. Everything changed, and the business itself changed, which is probably the most important thing. The business end of the music business changed. The managers, the agents, the people who started up the new record companies, they were people like us, straight out of school, with a mission to change the face of the world, which in some ways they did. And the record industry moved away from a singles-dominated market to an album market where it was permissible to try new things, where it was possible to experiment. And to some extent we owe something, to the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, who were part of that spearheading movement. They were the people who bridged that gap between the old showbiz days and the new progressive days.
Because they could have hit singles, which was quite important.
They started off by having hit singles. Even Jethro Tull had some hit singles, but we probably sold about 10 copies. It was just that hardly anybody was selling singles, and therefore if you sell a few hundred singles in a week, you got on top of the pops, because there was just, it was an album-dominated market. So we came in then, we were part of all of that change, and obviously in the 70s all of that kind of progressive music went through its excesses, the various roads that groups like Yes and Genesis and Jethro Tull went down proved to be dead-end roads, and we had to sort of come back to some extent with tails between our legs and carry on trying to find a career doing, something slightly different. But we were basically part of something where at least we were trying to push the limits a bit. But in the wake of that came punk, which was again a refreshing back to basics and sort of aggressive approach. But punk was seized upon by the industry. Same industry who'd been the progressive people 10 years ago are now kind of respectable early middle-age managers and agents now. They're the new breed, but now they've got mortgages and families and rent to pay every week, and they start taking it a bit more seriously. So they grabbed punk as a sort of new phenomenon. The difference between punk and what we did was that punk had a place in the high street. Punk was fashion. Punk was haircuts. Punk was the basis on which what you see on top of the pops now was formed, where it is back to the days where the haircut comes first, the clothes come a close second, the music comes a distant third. We live in the age of haircuts again. And that's exactly what it was like when I started music, as an amateur, as a schoolboy. That was the kind of world I perceived it to be. Luckily, for me, I never had to go through that phase, but we're back to showbiz again. We're back.
Did you feel left out, though, in the punk era at all?
Not really,
No?
because the punk era would just seem to me very similar to the kind of thing that, when it started, I mean, with the Sex Pistols and people who are on balance, I mean, I thought were actually okay. But all of that particular thing was musically quite refreshing, very simple and very direct and aggressive and all the rest of it. Musically, it was refreshing. What wasn't refreshing was seeing the way that it was seized upon by the industry and turned into high street marketing. And that I find very objectionable, and that young people of that age should have woken up to the fact they were being manipulated. And, you know, these days we're sort of living in that post-punk era where everything is now beautifully glossy, beautifully Marks and Spencer's again, and music in the popular sense is back to being 100% showbiz.
And do you like it today?
No, of course I don't, because I loathe the showbiz thing. I mean, I hate all of that sort of glossiness and the rules that, you know, you do a certain thing in a certain way and you have record producers telling you what to play and the record company, you know, sign you up for a single rather than an album, you know. Yeah. The whole thing is showbiz. So, you know, from that point of view, I don't really enjoy the way music is as a whole. But I'm lucky. I don't have to play the ball. I don't actually have to be in that game. I'm, you know, always been kind of out on the edge of it all, so I can look in and sort of smirk and say, that's okay. You know, we may not be as popular as we were in the mid-'70s, when, if we went to New York, we would play to 50,000 people. When we go to New York this November, we will play to 30,000 people. And, okay, that's a step down. But 30,000 people is still, you know, a lot of people. That's okay.